see it.
Radio 1 remembers.
Chillin' FM.
And welcome back to the show. My name is Kamala Smith, and right now, sitting next to the two wonderful ladies, we will be talking about the current events regarding the Vietnam War. So, Caroline, Elizabeth, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Today's weather was lovely, so I went on a little walk and enjoyed some sunlight. Thank you, Camilla.
I cooked a wonderful family recipe for an apple pie, cleaned the house, and my husband only hit me 3 times, so I'm doing amazing.
Wow, that sounds lovely, ladies. My day was really good too. Elizabeth, you intrigued me with the apple pie recipe. You have to send me it later. So let's get back to the topic at hand. How did you feel at the start of the war?
I was about 10 years old when the war started, so I didn't understand much of what was happening at the time, even though the Cold War had already started 4 years before I was born. But I still heard and read some news. I heard about an independent country called Vietnam that was at war with France.
I remember when the French lost the Nazis, so fortunately Vietnam was freed, but not for long, because the French regained control again, and that's when the Vietnam War really started. Do you remember how the USA helped? They gave a lot of money to France to help with it, right? Like $2 billion?
$2.6 billion, actually, but France was still unsuccessful in taking Vietnam. Then a civil war broke out in 1960, and the USA had to get involved because a liberal front called the Viet Cong was created. It consisted of anti-government forces like Buddhists, patriots, and communists. Implementing guerrilla tactics, which were complex underground tunnels that they used for importing weapons and supplies, they successfully waged war on Vietnam's President Diem's government. Then the Viet Minh and Pat That Lao, both communist groups, worked together to try and overthrow the monarchy. The president of the US at the time, John F. Kennedy, didn't want communism to spread this to South Vietnam, so...
Wait, you forgot about the Geneva Agreements.
The what?
You know, the Geneva Agreements, the main points of the treaty were thus: Indochina would be divided into 4 parts, North and South Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. All foreign troops would withdraw from Indochina. Elections will be held in 1956. International commissions will make sure all of this was respected. Several nations, excluding the USA, signed the agreements.
Oh yeah, right, the Geneva Agreements. Okay, now let's get back to Kennedy's policy action.
I remember when the policy action was allowed because America was so scared of communism spreading.
The old USA President Eisenhower even warned Kennedy that it is like a cork in a bottle. Once it popped, the whole region would fall into communism. But the CIA helped a lot by training an anti-communist force to send supplies in from Thailand.
Okay, ladies, so do you remember anything very traumatizing?
Yeah, the aerial bombing. It continued heavily until 75. I remember my family being so scared.
Wow, did someone try to stop the bombing?
Yeah, in South Vietnam, 16,000 military advisors were sent to help Diem. But in November of 63, the CIA helped stage an internal coup, which ended in the bloody execution of Diem and his advisors.
I remember that later that month the same thing happened to Kennedy.
Johnson succeeded Kennedy, right? And he was a firm believer in the domino theory. So can you tell me more about that?
It's simple. If one country falls into communism, the neighboring countries will follow suit. Like domino pieces. The theory was actually first outlined by Eisenhower in 1954 at a press briefing on Vietnam.
If I'm not mistaken, Johnson was given the opportunity to expand American involvement. But how?
Through the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Very simple as well. When a US warship was alleged to have come under North Vietnamese fire and the Congress gave the president authority to send more military power to Vietnam.
Oh, okay, so the USA was fully involved in the war. But did they win?
They did. The tactics were the main reason which led them to victory. They heavily used aerial bombing to destroy Viet Cong strongholds, used chemical weapons to destroy trees and jungles. They also did search and destroy missions. Combat units would go out into the countryside to locate Viet Cong weapons, stores, bases, and fighters. They strictly punished the villages that tried to help the enemy.
The North Vietnam Army had less involvement in 1968 or more?
No, quite the opposite actually. The Vietnam Army became more involved. The Tet Offensive saw Viet Cong troops almost capture the US Embassy.
Hold on, no, America didn't win. The factors that went into the war were just too powerful.
But the USA claimed that the victory was close, didn't they?
Yeah, they claimed it. The Viet Cong were not even close to defeat. That caused anti-war protests in the USA, and Johnson announced to Americans that he would not be running as president again.
Who was elected next?
Richard Nixon.
How was he as a president?
He promised to end the war.
But he didn't want to withdraw in a humiliating fashion, and his Vietnamization policy reduced USA troop numbers.
Oh yeah, and extended the aerial bombing into Cambodia without telling the Congress, which increased public criticism.
Since the year 1968 was a vital one, the peace talk did help and made progress in 1972. To force the hand of the North, Nixon launched the heaviest aerial bombardments yet. He also made a secret promise to the South that the USA would support them, but again, the Congress didn't know.
How did the war end?
In January of 1973, a peace treaty was signed, with US troops withdrawing from Vietnam. The South would have to defend itself, especially as Nixon was forced to resign in 1974 over the Watergate scandal.
Wait, what is the Watergate scandal?
The Watergate scandal erupted when a group of men broke into the Watergate Hotel to steal documents, but they were caught and it was revealed that Nixon was involved.
Okay, back to it. The North invaded the South and won. Then they seized the capital and entered the US Embassy.
I'm sure that it was a humiliating moment for the USA, and it marked their total defeat in Vietnam. So you see, Elizabeth, they lost.
So, what caused them to lose?
Well, first of all, it was the military forces. The Viet Cong were incredibly organized and difficult to identify. They were also very experienced in their hit and run tactics because they were already fighting in their own soil for years, while the American troops would fight for a year then leave.
And to add on to what Caroline said, some other important factors were the domestic ones. The public was beginning to be more and more against the war, and as propaganda was really important during the Cold War, the USA just couldn't afford to be seen killing innocent civilians. Johnson and Nixon became the faces of hate and were forced to leave their offices without any salvageable reputation. The media showed the worst of the war, and so the people were understandably against it.
How about the disapproval of the dominatory?
That also was a big part, yes. When it was found that the theory was incorrect, the strategic importance of Vietnam became obsolete. For example, Cambodia and Laos did fall into communism, but Thailand and the Philippines didn't.
And yes, and one of Nixon's policies even helped improve the relations between USSR and China. So whatever happened in Vietnam didn't have as bad consequences as might have been imagined in the 1960s.
Well, thank you, ladies, for this very informational talk. Now, would you like to hear my opinion?
No.
No.
Oh, okay, well, let's get back to our favorite hit songs of the 70s.
Wait.